So this week, I want to um, recap compassion a little bit, and then we'll talk about joy. The, these are the two responses of the caring heart, the heart that connects when it encounters first suffering and then well-being or joy or goodness. And yeah, the two parts of compassion, I'm just kind of saying again some things that I said last week. The two parts are being touched by suffering, so not holding oneself aloof from it, and staying focused on the possibility of the freedom from suffering. So the what helps us to be touched by suffering without being overwhelmed by it is an understanding of the first noble truth that this is how things are. This suffering isn't a mistake. It isn't us getting things wrong. This is just what comes with this human birth of ours. There's a poem I want to share by Warsan Shire called What They Did Yesterday Afternoon. They set my aunt's house on fire. I cried the way women on TV do, folding at the middle like a 5-pound note. I called the boy who used to love me, tried to okay my voice. I said, hello. He said, Warsan, what's wrong? What's happened? I've been praying, and these are what my prayers look like. Dear God, I come from 2 countries. One is thirsty, the other is on fire. Both need water. Later that night, I held an atlas in my lap, ran my fingers across the whole world and whispered, where does it hurt? It answered, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And so given that the whole world is on fire, that it's not any one person, any one place that experiences suffering, we don't have to feel singled out. We don't have to feel surprised or hard done by when we encounter difficulties or suffering. And the heart can be touched by the poignancy of this truth of dukkha, this truth of unsatisfactoriness, without being shocked by it. And the other thing that supports compassion to not become grief is this focus on the second aspect of compassion, this desire for beings to be free from suffering. There's that expression, compassion fatigue, and Venerable Analayo makes the point that we should actually refer to that as empathy fatigue, because the desire for suffering to end, that's not fatiguing, right? It's the sense of being like pulled down by others' suffering. That's what depletes us. And I think there's more to compassion fatigue than that. Like oftentimes there's an aspect of moral injury, just the feeling of helplessness, or the feeling that your work requires you to acquiesce in harmful situations. And even there, I think that the other side of compassion, the desire for beings to be free from suffering, can help to protect against, let's just call it compassion fatigue. And part of that is the wisdom side of compassion, the understanding that, the understanding of impermanence, the understanding of emptiness, the understanding of causality. That when there's a kind of bone deep understanding of emptiness, suffering is less of a threat. There's, there's the Tibetan practice Tonglen, which involves, breathing in suffering and breathing out healing, and it's a practice that is, it's easiest to do when there is that understanding that there's no one here to breathe anything in. If there's a sense of I'm trying to manufacture compassion or I'm trying to manufacture a solution to your problems, if there's this solidifying around a sense of me fixing things and you having a problem, it can be exhausting. It can really push you past your limits. And when there isn't that sense of solidification, when there's just the heart responding, that's when these practices, whether Tonglen or other forms of compassion, can be easeful, can be sustainable. So I think that's one of the most important things to understand about all of these Brahmaviharas, that they're not things we need to manufacture. They're not things we need to make happen. They're just a way that the heart can respond when it's not weighed down by ideas of us and them, when it's not becoming the one who has to fix things or figure things out. It can just open into a natural compassion. And Angie, go ahead.
Hi, Rachel. I have a quick question because I'm interested, especially in what you said about compassion fatigue. Like, I work with adults with disabilities, and we go through a lot of what you just described. However, in our official documentation, it's referred to as caregiver fatigue. So it kind of took the emotion out of it, and it's often framed to us that, this is a job not involving your own emotions. So anyway, when you said that you might actually call it empathy fatigue, I was wondering if there's a difference between that and compassion fatigue.
Yeah, so what I was drawing on was the distinction I was making between, so the Pali words I'm translating here are karuna for compassion and anukampa for empathy. So anukampa is like the quivering of the heart in response to suffering, and karuna is the desire for beings to be free from suffering. And it's karuna that we're cultivating here. And so if you think of empathy as like the being touched by suffering, compassion, I've kind of been working around the connotations of the English word compassion, because it's from the Latin roots that actually means suffering with, right? And so we don't, like, if you're doing a lot of suffering with somebody, that's going to be fatiguing, right? And so my point with all of this, like these distinctions that I'm making, is that there has to be the willingness to get close to suffering, but what we're cultivating, what we're strengthening, is this wish for beings to be free from suffering. So caregiver fatigue, anybody in a caregiving position has the potential to feel a lot of frustration if it seems like the situation they're dealing with is intractable, or if the demands that are placed on them are just too great. And probably the manual at your workplace was trying to nudge you towards cultivating as much equanimity as possible. And we're going to be talking about that next week. When we when there's this sense of solidification into, I am the one who fixes things and you are the one who has a problem, we lose equanimity. We tend to take on things that aren't necessarily our burdens to carry, and that gets fatiguing really quick. Yeah, so that's my attempt to, yeah, reconcile those different ways of talking about what compassion is and what can be its downfall. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and maybe just one other thing to say about compassion is that in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it's seen as being the fundamental one of these four immeasurable qualities, and compassion is seen as being the highest treasure. Something that is, like if you lose compassion, you've lost everything. And there's a really touching story of the Dalai Lama's doctor, who is another monastic in Tibet, who, when the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet into India, his doctor wasn't able to escape and was captured by the Chinese government and army, and was in prison for, I think it was 17 years. I'm foggy on the exact number. And finally escaped prison and made his way to India, where he was reunited with the Dalai Lama. And he was asking him about his experience in captivity and said, were you ever in danger? Oh, yes, absolutely. Towards the end, I was in grave danger. Oh, so they were starting to torture you? No, they tortured me most days for most of my time in captivity. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that I was starting to lose compassion for my captors. And so that was when I knew I was in danger and I needed to find a way to get myself out of this situation. The Dalai Lama said, when I'd known him before his captivity, I thought he was a very ordinary kind of practitioner. And after this, I really had to revise my opinion of his practice. But isn't that amazing, just to see one's heart, the ability of one's heart to stay oriented with compassion as being of greater significance than your physical safety? That's just so inspiring to me. There's a quote from The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places. But still there is much that is fair, and though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. So the heart that is touched by the heart that is willing to connect with other beings, that can be touched by others' suffering. It's the heart that responds, the heart that cares. And then when that caring heart encounters happiness, it responds with joy. And I think I want to do a demonstration of this. So I'm going to share a little video here. Oh, and just notice what happens in your heart as you watch this.
Whoa! Here we go. Here, have some more. That's the funniest thing ever. Here you go. Here. Another piece. Ready? You haven't ripped it yet. You haven't ripped it yet. You know it's coming. Grab it. Here.
What was it like to see that baby laughing? The it's a natural process when the heart that is willing to connect encounters well-being, however transient, whatever the source. As long as there's a wholesomeness to it, it's natural for the heart to be uplifted. And this quality of appreciative joy is related to gratitude. It's so the heart that's able to appreciate good conditions, can take in goodness when it exists in our own life, and it can take in goodness when it exists in others' lives. There's the Dalai Lama again says, if you can make other people's happiness your own, you increase your odds of happiness by 7 billion to 1. It's pretty good odds. And so with this heart quality, it's the opposite of envy. So it's there. One of the things that obstructs this ability of the heart to open into joy is a feeling of being threatened by other beings' well-being. This feeling that, oh, if you have something, there must be less for me. And there's certain material cases, like there's only so many pieces of pie to go around, for example. But with more abstract qualities like happiness, it isn't limited. There isn't any real reason for that feeling of envy or threat to exist. And so it's an opportunity for us to just map the landscape of the heart. Just what is it like to have that obstruction to the heart's responsiveness of joy? And that feeling of lack can arise when there's this feeling of buying into a story about who I am, who you are, who we are with respect to each other. I have less than you, you have more than me. This sense of positioning ourselves and buying into these narratives about what it is to be me, what it is to be you. And when we see that, we can get curious. Okay, so what would it be like to drop that narrative? What would it be like to step out of being the one who doesn't have enough, just for this moment? And this feeling of not enough, so much of our economy relies on it, doesn't it? Like there's so many businesses that depend on us shopping our way to well-being. There's a quote I'd like to share from a novel called Uprooted by Naomi Novik. It's somebody who's learning to do magic. And she's all alone in a tower with a wizard. She says, trying to cure my loneliness, I went down to the kitchens and made myself a small feast, just ham and kasha and stewed apples. When I put together the plate, it felt so plain and empty that for the first time I used a spell for myself, aching for something that felt like a celebration. The air shimmered, and suddenly I had a lovely platter of roast pork, hot and pink and running with juice, my very favorite wheat porridge, a heap of brand new fresh peas, and a cake that I'd only ever tasted once at the head woman's table, all of it glazed and shining with honey syrup. But it wasn't midwinter dinner. There was no eager ache of hunger in my belly from the long day of cooking and cleaning without a pause. There was no joyful noise of too many people crammed in around the table, laughing and reaching for the platters. Looking down at my tiny feast only made me feel more desperately lonely. I thought of my mother cooking all alone without even my clumsy pair of hands to help her, and my eyes were stinging when I put my untouched tray on my table. I love how that quote encapsulates how we try to, like I said, industries depend on us, trying to purchase an experience of connectedness, having the flavors associated with a festive meal is not the same thing as having the human connection of a festive meal. And and so when we are when we're buying into this view of self as disconnected or deficient or experiencing lack, there's a deadening in the heart, and the opposite, the aliveness of joy, isn't the same thing as having everything the way we want it to be. Joy can coexist with suffering. Many years ago, I was walking with my parents, and I was in a rush. I think we were going to dinner, and for some reason I felt like we needed to get there quickly. And my father needed to walk slowly because he'd hurt his foot. And I was sort of feeling impatient and rushed. And he was using his physical pain and need to go slow as an opportunity to, check out the gardens of the houses that we were going by and talking to the people that were in the gardens. He learned about several different kinds of roses just on that way to dinner. So physical pain, inconvenience, discomfort, these things can coexist with the heart that connects, the heart that delights, the heart that is uplifted by the natural world. Yeah. So there's a few different kinds of joy that are worth touching on. One is integrity, the bliss of blamelessness. The Buddha describes this as the highest happiness that's available to lay people. It's like if you have to settle for second best, the lay life, at least you can have the bliss of blamelessness. Isn't that nice for you? The Buddha clearly, he had his standards for the highest happiness. So being able to look back on our past actions without remorse, such a beautiful support for our meditation practice. Having the ability to see your own past good actions helps the heart and mind to get happy. And a happy heart is one that's able to settle in meditation. There's the joy of presence, the happiness of being all in one place. The mind that is not dispersed is there's a really exquisite kind of happiness there that is it's sometimes too subtle for us to notice. It might feel not so much like joy as like okayness or aliveness. Sensitivity is a way it can show up. Being touched by the natural world. In September, I spent a couple weeks on retreat, and partway through, I don't know, I was having a day when my mind felt really distracted, and I was like, oh, am I even on retreat? And then I walk outside and I saw a fern, and it was just so tender and soft that I started crying. And I'm like, yeah, I'm crying over a fern. Okay, yeah, I'm on retreat. Right. But if you've spent time on retreat, you know what I mean, right? Like there's a sensitization of the heart that happens. You're just so much more available for the beauty of the natural world. There's there's the bliss of blamelessness, the joy of presence, a sensitization, a sweetness that enables. And another form of joy that we can cultivate is contentment. There's a quote from the writer Kurt Vonnegut, who was at a party with another distinguished writer and at the house of somebody with like absurdly large amounts of money. So it was a very fancy party and fancy house, and a lot of ostentatious displays of wealth. And Kurt Vonnegut said to the other writer, wow, like, how do you feel knowing that this person, makes more money in 1 minute than you've made from all the books that you've sold? The other writer says, I have something that he'll never have. I have the knowledge that I have enough. Isn't that amazing? Just the contentment, knowing that you're okay with what you have. And for especially for monastics who rely on dana, inner contentment is what determines whether they're spending their time with a feeling of wealth or with a feeling of deprivation. And so all of these forms of joy are really, they're essential for keeping the heart balanced. Rebecca Solnit says, joy doesn't betray but sustains activism. When you face a politics that aspires to make you fearful, alienated, and isolated, joy is a fine initial act of insurrection. Isn't that great? Insurrection of joy. Nick Cave says, joy is not always a feeling that is freely bestowed upon us. Often it's something we must actively seek. In a way, joy is a decision, an action, even a practiced method of being. It is an earned thing brought into focus by what we have lost. I think I'm just going to be reading a bunch of quotes about joy here. Leonard Bernstein says, this will be our response to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before. C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters says, something like joy is expressed in music, and something like it occurs in heaven, an acceleration of the rhythm of experience. Fun is closely related to joy, a sort of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. It promotes charity, courage, and contentment. I kind of want to read that whole chapter. It's the Screwtape Letters is such a funny book and so much incisive wisdom about the spiritual path from a Christian point of view. And so there's all of those related aspects of joy, and the form of joy that is really what I'm supposed to be talking about today is mudita, which is appreciative joy. It's taking delight in others' good fortune. And this doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be other people enjoying the same things that you enjoy, as long as it's something that is not intrinsically harmful. It's appropriate to take joy in it. So I've got an acquaintance who likes to spend his time in a purpose-built shed in his backyard, making these really elaborate models of boats. He gets these kits that have all the parts to make a pirate ship or a historic ship of some kind, and then he'll do extra research and figure out exactly how the rigging would have been set up and exactly what kind of like cannons would have, I don't know, like he gets really elaborate with this, and it takes like pretty much all of his time. And the result is, he's very painstaking. The result is, quite impressive. And there's part of me that's like, well, you could have been doing a lot of other things. And so, there can be an instinct towards judgment instead of joy at his enjoyment. But, when I really stop and think about it, like he's not hurting anybody with what he's doing. And it's bringing him a lot of happiness. He's using his ingenuity and persistence. And so why not take delight in his happiness? This heart that delights in other people's well-being helps to reaffirm the connection between us. There was a moment after a retreat some years ago when some friends who'd been on the retreat and I were, the retreat had been near Santa Cruz, and so we were walking along the beach in Santa Cruz. And if you've ever been there, it's a wonderful beach for surfers. And a bunch of surfers all had gotten into position, and a big wave came along, and they all came up onto the wave at the same time, and were going along at a great rate of speed. And spontaneously, the whole group of us was like, yes, we were watching them, and it just felt so natural to be delighted by what the delight that I was imagining those surfers would feel. And it's not that I personally ever have any desire to be on a surfboard for any reason whatsoever, but it's just this sense of, oh wow, they're probably finding it exhilarating to be doing what they're doing right now. And yeah, some people argue that joy from this point of view is actually an easier doorway into connection for many of us than goodwill as such, just because like this, it's just so natural to smile when you see kids playing with a dog, for example, or if you see friends laughing together, there's a natural uplift. And in moments when there isn't, that's good information also. Somebody was pointing out the other day that envy is just another pointer to your own longings. So I noticed, this is a really silly example, but I noticed the other day that I was feeling kind of envious about somebody I saw in the street wearing like a really strikingly patterned long skirt. And I'm like, oh, I wish I had a skirt like that. And I'm like, I could get a skirt like that. Like, that is something I could do, right? Like, I'm wearing kind of drab clothing today. And if I'm noticing, a feeling of lack arising around somebody else wearing striking clothing, oh, interesting. There's some wanting here. Okay, I can make space for that. And I don't like why our mindfulness practice is so important in this terrain of noticing the heart moving between joy and envy and judgment is if we're not seeing that movement of the heart as something the heart is doing, it's really easy to put it out onto other people. So, like, I don't think maybe there's people who would like make rules about wearing too brightly patterned clothing, but, there's lots of people who do, judge other people in really consequential ways for, how much skin they show, for example. And, if they were really practicing mindfulness, maybe they'd notice, oh, right, there's some judgment coming up around somebody presenting in a way that strikes me as very sexy. Maybe that's a sign that, there's something about my own sexuality that needs some attention. I really wish that everybody in the world could bring that kind of mindfulness to our relationships together, because we sure make things complicated when we make our feelings other people's problems. So this heart that is willing to entertain the possibility of taking delight in other people's goodness, along the way, we are going to get to see the ways our heart shuts down and doesn't take delight in others' well-being. And so, that gives us information about what in our own hearts needs tending to. And there's also in addition to delighting in other people's current well-being, it's also helpful to broaden the scope of the causes of joy a little further and take delight in goodness. In the Tibetan tradition, a phrase for expressing goodwill is, may you have happiness and the cause of happiness, which is virtue. And so when we see others acting with patience or kindness or generosity, it's really appropriate for our hearts to be uplifted, for us to take delight in their well-being. And so because that's the case, it's always going to be possible to find causes of joy, even in very challenging situations. When there's in natural disasters, in situations of conflict, there's always going to be people doing their best to help. And because that's just how humans are. Sometimes we mess up, but a lot of the time we try to help. And so being able to let the heart be uplifted by the goodness of others means that even in situations where there's a lot of difficulty, a lot of heaviness, there can still also be joy. And so when there's the poignancy of suffering and also the uplift of joy, it's easier for the heart to stay in balance. There's a quote by the medieval Tibetan teacher Longchenpa, out of the fertile soil of goodwill grows the beautiful flower of compassion, watered by tears of joy and shaded by the great tree of equanimity. I'll probably share that quote again next week because it encapsulates the relationship of these Brahmaviharas so well. But it's interesting. You would think, oh well, joy is beautiful, so it should be the flower, and compassion gives rise to tears. So that's how that pair should go. But to see compassion as a beautiful flower that needs the moistening, the vivification of joy to stay alive, to stay nourished, that makes a lot of sense to me also. So let's give this a try. Let's do some meditation practice. We'll sit for about half an hour. So just check in with the body, see what posture feels appropriate for you right now. If it's been a really long day and you're tired, you might want to stand up If the body is really uncomfortable, you might want to lie down. And if you're sitting, just see if there can be a sense of inner uprightness as well as ease. And as you're settling in, bring to mind somebody who it's really easy for you to delight in their happiness. For me, this is my brother. He's got a very happy temperament, so it's easy to imagine him being happy. And he also has, he has challenges in his life, but he has a lot of good things going on. He spent the weekend hiking with his kids. I know how much he likes doing that. And thinking of him hiking with his kids, it's just an automatic smile that comes to my face. So think of somebody who when you think of their happiness, you just start smiling. Maybe this is somebody close to you. Maybe it's somebody you've read about. It's not so important that they be a big part of your life. It's just easy to feel happy at their happiness. Maybe it's that baby in the video I showed. And imagining that being in front of you with a smile on their face. And just notice how your heart feels as you bring their image to mind. And you might offer them a phrase that expresses this feeling of delight in the heart. The traditional phrase is, may your happiness and good fortune continue. May they increase and never wane. Or you might try something simpler, like, I'm happy that you're happy. Letting the heart rest in this feeling of connecting with their happiness. Noticing what it's like. If there's a feeling of uplift, lightness, just notice that. Dropping in words or phrases, whatever it feels appropriate. Dear one, I'm happy that you're happy. And just like we can appreciate what's going well for this happy person, we can appreciate the things that are going well in our own lives. Just reflecting. Today I had enough health to participate in this event. Tonight, I probably have somewhere warm to sleep. There's people in my life who appreciate me. I've got clean running water. Just not taking for granted any dimension of our well-being or happiness. Maybe just dropping in a simple phrase like, I appreciate my good fortune. As we familiarize the heart with the quality of gratitude, appreciation. Sometimes when we start thinking about things in our life that are going well, the mind can also present us with a list of things that are not going well. Just letting that go. For right now, deliberately orienting the attention towards things that are going well. And inviting the mind to let go of any stories about any of it. In this kind of meditation, we're using concepts and reflections as a means to an end, just bringing in enough of a concept to point the heart in a particular direction. Trying to avoid stirring up the mind with a lot of stories about how our lives are. Just really simple. I appreciate my good fortune. And as we continue to map the terrain of the heart, you could bring to mind your benefactor, a dear friend, someone you care about a lot. And their life probably has areas of challenge and areas of ease. And for right now, bringing to mind whatever is going well for your dear person. I've got a dear friend who's got a family member with very difficult health situation right now, but she finds a lot of joy in nature. And so when I'm using her in this practice, I imagine her sitting under a beautiful tree, knowing how much that would uplift her heart. So, my dear one, may your happiness and good fortune continue. May they increase and never wane. I'm happy that you're happy. Noticing what the heart feels like. Inviting the possibility of mudita with this dear person. And continuing to map the terrain of the heart, bring to mind a neutral person. Maybe somebody that you saw in passing, playing with a dog. Having fun with a small child. Sometimes a really uncomplicated mudita can arise with strangers just enjoying themselves. May your happiness and good fortune continue. May they increase and never wane. Notice how the heart feels as you turn the attention to the joy of this neutral person. Sometimes with a neutral person, there's a need for a little bit more intentionality around dropping in phrases or sustaining their image. And might or might not be the case for you right now. And if you're up for a challenge, you could bring to mind a difficult person in the sense of somebody you've had conflict with. For today, pick somebody you've had a pretty minor conflict with, or maybe somebody you don't like just for no good reason. And imagine them enjoying some kind of wholesome happiness. Again, perhaps playing with a dog or a small child. And see if it's possible to extend the same wishes of mudita to them. May your happiness and good fortune continue. May they increase and never wane. To see how the heart feels as you entertain that possibility. And if you're up for a Olympic level challenge, you could bring to mind somebody who has something you want, somebody who does challenge that feeling of lack in you. And see if it's possible for the heart to be uplifted by their happiness. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you won't know unless you try. I'm happy that you're happy. May your happiness and good fortune continue. May they increase, never wane. Just notice what the heart feels like right now. And you could imagine these 6 people all standing together, the happy person, yourself, your benefactor, the neutral person, and these 2 different difficult people. May all of our good fortune continue. May it increase, never wane. Notice what the heart feels like as you offer that wish to the group of the 6 of you. Letting go of those imagined individuals and letting the heart expand out to all humans. Every human being may have suffering, but they also have joy. And I'm happy that they're happy. May their happiness continue. All animals also have moments of delight. May the happiness of all animals continue. There are some beings who have happiness from things that make sense to me. May their happiness continue. There are some beings who draw happiness from things that don't make sense to me. May their wholesome happiness continue. There are beings who are experiencing happiness right now. I rejoice in their happiness. There are beings who are creating the conditions for future happiness through their patience or generosity or kindness, truthfulness, determination. I delight in their future happiness. Letting the heart rest in the vastness of gladness. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "They don't publish the good news. The good news is published by us. We have a special edition every moment, and we need you to read it. The good news is that you are alive, and the linden tree is still there, standing firm in the harsh winter. The good news is that you have wonderful eyes to touch the blue sky. The good news is that your child is there before you, and your arms are available. Hugging is possible. They only print what is wrong. Look at each of our special editions. We always offer the things that are not wrong. We want you to benefit from them and help protect them. The dandelion is there by the sidewalk, smiling its wondrous smile, singing the song of eternity. Listen, you have ears that can hear it. Bow your head, listen to it. Leave behind the world of sorrow and preoccupation and get free. The latest good news is that you can do it. And as we come to the end of this period of formal practice, wishing to all beings hearts that are free from stinginess, free from envy, free from any kind of withholding from life. So in this last period of our time together, I'd really like to invite questions or responses via chat is great. If you're up for being recorded, you're welcome to unmute and speak into the group as well. And maybe I'll just also share a couple of thoughts about these categories of beings that I was just offering in this practice. So starting out with somebody whose happiness is very easy for you to be uplifted by. One thing I should have mentioned before we got started is in these practices of metta and compassion and joy, it's best to pick people who you have uncomplicated relationships with. So a parent or a child or a partner, there can be a lot of tenderness or uplift there, but there's also often, more complicated things. At minimum, a sense of attachment. I think I might have said a few weeks ago, the wish of metta is, may you be happy. And the wish of attachment is, I can't stand it if you're not happy. And it's equanimity that creates enough space for metta to not become attachment. And similarly for joy to not become a demand that good fortune continue. And so our nearest and dearest are often most appropriate people to work with in the context of the formal practice of equanimity, rather than the other Brahmaviharas. They're going to be there in our practice in the category of all beings, so it's not like they're going to be left out. But they're appropriate kind of exercises to take on next week when we're doing equanimity. When we're turning toward ourself with this practice of gratitude folded into this practice of appreciative joy, this is not a traditional thing to do. So if you went to a monastery in Burma and were learning this practice, they would tell you not to include yourself in this practice. My opinion is that a lot of Western teachers do include oneself in various ways in this practice. And I think that's a useful thing to do because so many of us are just so oriented to what's lacking, to what we're getting wrong, to feelings of threat, to comparing with other people who have more, and remembering what's going well is just it's really good medicine for that particular kind of being out of balance. So it's and it's not a matter of trying to feel a certain way, putting on a happy face. It's just remembering, right? There's areas of challenge in my life, and there's some pretty basic things that are going right. Let me not miss that. It's when aversion is in the mind, it creates a kind of tunnel vision. It predisposes us to see only what's wrong, and once we're seeing what's wrong, that tends to strengthen the quality of aversion, and so it's sort of a self-reinforcing thing. And aversion can manifest as anger or fear or shame, self-blame, just this inner sense of hostility and not rightness. And so one way of breaking out of that tunnel vision is just with this remembering what else is true, deliberately broadening out the scope of the awareness. So deliberately reminding oneself of things that are going right can help to undercut this lens of inner hostility that we look at ourselves with so often. So using this practice to overwrite any feelings of lack or shame or self-judgment that we're carrying around, it's such an unburdening, so much more ease when those things are not weighing us down. When we're turning toward a difficult person who's difficult because we've had some kind of conflict, as with both metta and compassion, it's really helpful to remind yourself, right, how much easier would things be between me and this person who stresses me out if we were both truly content? It just makes sense for me to wish them, true happiness and contentment. They would be so much easier to get along with if they didn't have a feeling of lack in their own lives. The practice of cultivating mudita towards somebody who has something you want is a very traditional one. Some of my teachers have shared stories about going to Burma and having a sayadaw tell them, okay, think of the person you feel most competitive with. Now and think of all of the people whose opinion you value the most. Imagine all of those dear people crowding around your difficult person and praising them and showering them with gifts and attention and telling them how wonderful they are. Could you delight in that person's good fortune in that moment? That's, like I said, that's kind of Olympic level mudita practice. Yeah, maybe I'll just pause there and see if there's any perspectives you want to share or anything you're curious about. I think, when I was thinking about joy earlier today, it's just striking me in these particularly challenging times. Not that there are times that are not challenging, but these seem extra spicy. It's there are power structures that are going to be reinforced by all of us falling into despair and disengaging and disconnecting from each other. And so living with an orientation towards joy, living with a determination to seek out sources of joy, to not let our hearts become hard or cynical or disconnected, apathetic. That's what's going to keep us human throughout whatever the next coming years hold. And that's what's going to help us live into the kind of world, the kind of culture, the kind of collective life of whatever kind that we want to see come into being. We depend on connecting across difference, and joy allows us to do that. There's one of the things I've done in the past year is to join a choir, and a lot of the people in this choir I wouldn't normally think I have a lot in common with, but making music together is just such a delight. And I think we're all going to need more of that in the coming months and years and decades. Just ways of using joy to connect with people who we might not see eye to eye with on a lot of things. There's a way in which, when we get stuck in the world of opinions, we can start finding reasons why everybody else is wrong or falling short in some way. And just playing with dogs in parks together, or going bowling together, or singing together, dancing together. Remembering what it's like to be human animals together. That's going to be a really important skill to build in the coming years. Yeah, there's a quote that's at the back of my mind that I'm not quite recollecting in enough detail to share. Maybe I'll just share this poem by Billy Collins called Aimless Love. This morning, as I walked along the lake shore, I fell in love with a wren, and later in the day with a mouse the cat had dropped under the dining room table. In the shadows of an autumn evening, I fell for a seamstress still at her machine in the tailor's window, and later for a bowl of broth, steam rising like smoke from a naval battle. This is the best kind of love, I thought, without recompense, without gifts or unkind words, without suspicion or silence on the telephone. The love of the chestnut, the jazz cap, and one hand on the wheel. No lust, no slam of the door. The love of the miniature orange tree, the clean white shirt, the hot evening shower, the highway that cuts across Florida. No waiting, no huffiness or rancor, just a twinge every now and again for the wren who had built her nest on a low branch overhanging the water, and for the dead mouse still dressed in its light brown suit. But my heart is always propped up in a field on its tripod, ready for the next arrow. After I carried the mouse by the tail to a pile of leaves in the woods, I found myself standing at the bathroom sink, gazing down affectionately at the soap, so patient and soluble, so at home in its pale green soap dish. I could feel myself falling again as I felt it turning in my wet hands and caught the scent of lavender and stone. I just love that as a depiction of the heart that is willing to be delighted in each moment by ordinary things. Yeah, Jillian.
Rachel, in seeing as there are hundreds of questions being thrown at you, I just wanted to take this moment to express my huge appreciation of how, in doing these guided meditations, you brought goodwill to ourselves into it at each level. Because, I so connect with this sense of inadequacy, which so many Westerners are brought up with. My therapist this morning referred to my Catholic guilt. And it's just so hard to undermine that, even having sort of accepted the Buddha's teachings, that sense of inadequacy just sort of seems to go on sitting there. So thank you for this orientation. It's beautiful. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jillian. One of my friends calls herself a cultural Catholic, all of the guilt, none of the redemption. And I think, for those of us who grew up in a different religious tradition or no religious tradition, if we grew up in mainstream Western culture with its extreme individualism, like there's pluses and minuses to every way that humans organize their cultures. And the plus of a very individualistic culture is you're free to find your own space and express yourself in creative ways. And the minus is that you're never quite sure if you're doing it right. And so, it's not you, it's not any one of us. It's just what this culture trains us in. And for me, the number one thing in overriding that is bodhicitta. There was this one time when it was after my first long retreat. I just started a new job and I was feeling kind of unsettled. And I was walking down a hallway and like noticing I was getting really uptight. And I realized the kind of underlying attitude in my mind was, am I walking down this hallway right? Which, the moment I articulated it, it's like, how could I walk down the hallway wrong? But like, that was kind of like, that was sort of the tension I was holding in my body. That was what it was saying. And I was still kind of feeling really uplifted by the teachings I'd gotten on that retreat about bodhicitta, with the heart mind of awakening, just this basic intention that any action that I undertake, may I undertake it for the benefit of all beings. And so I was like, okay, so it doesn't make sense to say, am I walking down this hallway right? It also doesn't make sense to say, may I walk down this hallway for the benefit of all beings. But what if I were to try that on? So I just dropped that in. May I walk down this hallway for the benefit of all beings? And like, oh yeah, wow, okay. It just sort of takes me out of the frame, right? Like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it right, if I'm doing it for the benefit of all beings. That's a way of, for me, that's the most effective way of aligning with my desire to be of service. That's the wholesome side of this, like, self-judgment, like, am I doing this right? Like, there is a beauty there. It's like, well, I want to be helpful and not harmful. And so the basic attitude of bodhicitta takes what's beautiful about that and drops the becoming the self who is getting it right. It's like, no, may I be of service, may service be done, right? Like, who it is who's doing it isn't so important. Like, it happens to be me, but like, whatever, right? So just putting that out there, I feel like that's, I don't know, maybe the 5th Brahmavihara or something, just like, or maybe the 0th Brahmavihara, because of the way that it unites the heart that cares with the wisdom of, it's not all about me. It's this, my life is just an offering. It's not something I'm getting right. So.
That's lovely. It's not something I'm getting right or I'm getting wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the fact that it's me doing it is kind of neither here nor there. Like, sure, it's important because this is where I have agency, but like adding any sense of I am the one who is getting this, like just that's extra. I could just opt out of that part. Any last thoughts before we wrap up? Okay, well, maybe taking a moment to gather up all of the merit or benefit that's come from this session today, from your determination to show up and your persistence in sticking with it, and any moments of tranquility or ease that have happened, gather those all up and give them away. Offer them up to all beings everywhere. May this practice be for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free. Thank you for your practice, everyone.